Bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's November 20th, and it's an early morning when you shut the brewery down. And it's always a good party in my book when you shut the place down. I mean, if you get kicked out of a place before they close, that's bad. If you get kicked out of a place because they want to close, that's good. I'll take that as a good sign. So, great crowd last night. Thanks to everybody who came out and joined us at Wild Heaven West End for our Broadcasters Roundtable. It was one of those conversations where, you know, we're all talking, and then you look down and you realize you've been talking for 2 hours, and it felt like 30 minutes. So, great time last night. Thanks, everybody. For those of you who did not make it, this will be available over the weekend. It's going to be a weekend special for you, so you'll be able to check out most of it and get a sense of it. But it was a lot of fun, and it was great to see everybody and meet some folks who have been listeners for a long time.
Yes, and to have said listeners remind you of how long they've been listening and how perpetually awful your food takes have been.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's nothing new. I think people remind you of that every day, though.
True, but, you know, when you're reminded of it in person, it adds that little extra oomph.
It's accurate.
I'm not denying the accuracy of it, but it was fun to see. It's fun to see Robin, fun to see Katie Weaver, and get into a discussion about Spurs and have Katie roll her eyebrows about their new hire. And
roll her eyebrows? How is that possible?
Well, roll your eyes and the eyebrows that go with.
You can't roll the eyebrows. I don't think. If you can, I mean, maybe that's
raise. Okay, talent. Raise eyebrows, roll your eyes, raise your eyebrows. It was a late night. We closed down a brewery.
You didn't even have any beer.
No, I didn't. I bequeathed that to everyone else. But no, it was good to see. It's good to see Kelly. Good to see Robin. Good to see Katie Weaver. Good to see Kevin and Mike and discuss pronunciations. That to me was the one of the more fun questions of the evening, is tackling pronunciations and having Kevin discussing the most difficult player in MLS and the pronunciation of that particular player's name.
Yes, which it's really not that difficult for some of us. It is for others.
Yes,
and that happens. That's the life of this. I mean, there's always names or things that'll trip you up that are just difficult in the moment. But it was fun to get into all kinds of different things, and the questions were great and took us down all kinds of different blind alleys. So you guys who did not make it out, you'll be able to hear some of that later this weekend. We have a ton of things to talk about this morning, so we're not going to bask in the glow of a fun night at Wild Heaven for too long, because we've got craziness with soccer over there, and yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit. Spurs pulled the trigger on Mauricio Pochettino and then pulled another trigger on Jose Mourinho, which is just nuts to me, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the expansion draft and all of the wheeling and dealing that took place immediately afterwards, and kind of what's next in the roster build for Miami and Nashville, but also for everybody else around the league. We'll talk about the U.S. national team. They booked their spot in the Concacaf Nations League semifinals. They'll be playing Honduras. We'll get into that. There's some rumors and news from around the league, and we'll talk about that as well. But we got to start with the expansion draft, because that was the big story of the day. It was an interesting one. I think what we said coming in, and what we learn every time after one of these, is it's so hard to predict what these teams are going to do in it, because you don't know necessarily if they're picking players to keep, if they're picking players to deal, if they have deals in place. We don't know all of the contract situations either, so it's a tricky process. We got a few of the guys that ended up being picked. There were a few that really surprised me. Actually, no, there was one that really surprised me because I think we talked about everybody who was picked in some form or fashion. Brian Meredith, the goalkeeper from the Sounders, was one that did not get mentioned at all. He goes to Miami, and the reason why that one really surprised me is right now Miami has two goalkeepers. They've got to sign Drake Callender, which you would expect since they traded for his homegrown rights. But Callender and Meredith are both talented young goalkeepers, but neither one has experience playing in Major League Soccer. Do you want to go down the Tyler Miller road, which has worked for LAFC to an extent, and take that risk, or do you want to go get a veteran goalkeeper, and maybe you have a move in place. It just hasn't been announced yet. So that one was the biggest surprise. Miami did not make any trades of their draft picks, so they are keeping, as of now, Brian Meredith, Ben Sweat, the left back from New York City, Alvis Powell, right back from Cincinnati, Lee Wynn, central midfielder from LAFC, and Luis Argudo, central midfielder from Columbus. Nashville is keeping, as of now, Abu Dunladi, forward from Minnesota, Jalil Anibaba, center back from New England, and Jimmy Madranda, central midfielder from Sporting Kansas City. They picked Zarek Valentine, and they flipped him to the Houston Dynamo for goalkeeper Joe Willis. The Dynamo can also get $75,000 in 2021 TAM if Willis hits certain incentives. They picked Brandon Vasquez. They flipped him to Cincinnati for $150,000 in TAM. They also made a trade of $50,000 in GAM, $125,000 in TAM, and a 2020 international slot for goalkeeper Adrian Zendejas. Young, talented, up-and-coming goalkeeper, but that's a lot. And then Nashville sent $50,000 in GAM and $50,000 in TAM and a 2020 international slot to Montreal for Daniel Lovitz, who was playing in the Cayman Islands for the United States, which is kind of funny. I'm sure he probably knew before he stepped out on the field. So, you look at what these teams have built so far, you've almost got base lineups. Now, in both cases, I think there are expectations that you'll get some bigger names on top of this. But now that we've seen how Miami and Nashville have built to this point, what do you think about each of the teams?
Dig what Nashville did. Love what I guess if you wanted to grade them, I'd give them a B+. And I guess I would go there because of the bulk that they were able to bring in, because you're trying to build a roster and build it quickly.
So you'd give them a B+ for yesterday?
Yes.
Okay.
B+ for yesterday. And that includes the trades and bringing in personnel. And you can see how Gary Smith is building, and defensively, I like the back line and how it could possibly be. My only question with Nashville SC was picking Abu Dunladi first overall. That to me was a stretch. And
matter. I mean but that doesn't matter in a two-team draft. I mean, I'm not getting hung up on where they were picked at all. I'm just worried about who they got.
And, for me, and I'm trying to find the full screen that had all of the personnel that Nashville picked up, but there was you had a full page of 15 dudes there. And
that's across the board. That's not yesterday.
Right.
That's why I was asking. Are you grading them a B+ for what they've done totally so far, or are you grading them a B+ for yesterday? So you're giving them a B+ for both.
Yeah,
I feel like
I'll give them a B.
High.
I'll give them a B+ for both, and I'm intrigued. But we all know you and I discussed what Gary Smith likes to do when it comes to formation and personnel. And for me, I like what they've been able to assemble. I know that there are a couple of places that I have concerns, and will USL talent translate to MLS and those kinds of things. So my main concerns are probably more in the middle and up top than any place else when it comes to Nashville, but I see what Gary is doing.
Well, right now, the only two USL talents that they have that are translating to MLS are Cameron Lancaster and Daniel Rios. And Rios, is not your typical USL talent. He came on loan from Chivas de Guadalajara to North Carolina before moving to Nashville. Lancaster had his success with Louisville first before coming to Nashville, so they haven't really made their USL signings just yet. Nashville, I think a B+ is too high. I think you might be giving them a B+ based off expectations for Nashville, not a B+ based off a roster build, because B+ to me is a playoff team, and I don't think this is a playoff team yet. Goalkeeper, Joe Willis is a veteran in this league, a very solid goalkeeper to build around. You're good there. Right now, your back line, you've got Daniel Lovitz on the left side. You've got Dave Romney, Jalil Anibaba as two center backs. If you play a 3-5-2, you're going to add another one, unless you think you're going to drop Anibal Godoy there, which you could potentially. You don't really have a right wing back as of yet. Central midfield, we mentioned Godoy. You also have McCarty. You also have Derek Jones. You have Hani Mukhtar. Forwards, you've got Lancaster. You've got Rios. You've got Dunladi. On the left side as a winger, which makes me wonder, maybe you're not going 3-5-2. You have Randall Leal, a Costa Rican. A little bit of an unknown as to how he will translate in year one. You've still got some gaps. So
yes.
Jimmy Madronda could play on the left side. He could play in the middle of midfield as well. So there's still some big question marks about Nashville for me. It's a solid base, but
yes,
if this is the core of your team, you're not finishing above 10th place in the East. There's no game changers in that. There's nothing to be afraid of. So that's why, for me, it's okay.
So you give him a C?
Maybe even lower than that, because I think you overpaid for Zendejas. That's a huge trade for a goalkeeper that right now is going to be your backup, because Joe Willis should be your starter. And if Willis is going to be your backup, then trading Zarek Valentine to Houston for Willis is a lot to give up. Either way, you gave up a lot for a backup goalkeeper. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
The move for Lovitz is a good one. I think that trade is a really smart one and good price tag on it. Dunladi, I don't know. With Lancaster and Rios, I kind of wonder, okay, why are you going Dunladi as well? You have three somewhat unproven forwards now that all have question marks. Anibaba and Madronda, both good pickups. Madronda, I really do like because of his versatility. I think he can be a very helpful player here for Gary Smith, but I'll go C- because I feel like they overpaid on backup goalkeeper either way, and they could have used that in a different way completely. Miami, it's solid. I mean, Ben Sweat was one that I would have went with Ibiaga off of NYC, but Ben Sweat's a guy who's played with the national team in the last couple of years, just a solid left back who can play in the middle of a back three if you want to go down that road. Alvis Powell can be a right wing back, preferably. Could also be a right back who's going to attack. Lee Wynn is going to have a year or two left in him that he can be a dangerous player in this league. He's a very good 8/10. Argudo is a versatile central midfielder who I think is a depth piece for you, and Meredith is the one that's a little bit of a surprise, just because you have now two goalkeepers that are unproven, and that's not a spot that I feel like you can risk too much. Although the Tyler Miller experience in LA might tend to make you think otherwise. So when you look at Miami as a whole, you've got young talent in Matias Pellegrini on the left wing, Julian Carranza as a forward, George Acosta as a central midfielder, Christian Macun as a central midfielder or center back, Grant Lillard as a center back. You have Jay Chapman, who I think can be a good player in this league, and now he'll have the opportunity to play more. David Norman Jr., unknown. Victor Ulloa, solid central midfielder, can sit as a 6, and I think really help this team. You've got, I think, a more intriguing base than Nashville, but both of them are very incomplete because you don't have that star power on top of this yet. And they're both, I think both have questions. For Nashville, it's the right side of the field. And for Miami, it is goalkeeper and the rest of the back line. If you go into the season with Sweat on the left, Lillard and McCoon, who's 19, in the middle, Alvis Powell on the right, you're going to get lit up. That's not strong enough defensively just yet, especially with a goalkeeper, either Drake Callender or Brian Meredith.
Right.
Oh, that's asking a lot. They've got to get better there, and you would expect that. I know everybody's talking about Miami spending all of their big money on the attack, and they probably will. I think they're going to spend some good TAM money on the back line and probably center back, maybe right back, and Powell becomes more of a reserve or attack-minded option for certain opponents. But you need a stud center back with that group.
So on the day, for me, I agreed with you when it came to Ibeagha. I thought Ibeagha was going to be the player for NYCFC that was going to be selected. We talked about Alvis Powell yesterday. Lee Wynn for me was a bit of a surprise as the player taken from LAFC, but understanding his veteran presence and leadership that you can get there for a first-year team, I get it. Argudo, I like. Meredith for me was the larger question, considering that you had Callender there and now you have Meredith and Callender, and we've talked about that point as well. So on the day, how would you – because for me, it's like, okay, I understand 4 of the 5, and okay, Meredith, and I heard Paul McDonough describe the why when he was talking to Jillian Sakovits about it. Is it 3.5 out of 5 for you or 4 out of 5 for you?
Why do you like Nashville's day more than Miami's?
I guess because of the bulk buy more than anything.
Just because they have more players?
Because they have more players and they're closer to filling out what I think they're looking for in their first-year team. I understand with Miami, the internationals that they brought in, the trades that they made before the draft and everything. And I'm looking at Miami as, because of what they did with these 4 plus Meredith, I understand that there are different philosophies in building a team. But for me specifically, in looking at the draft in and of itself and the trade that gets them the 1 and the 3 in the super draft, obviously they have something in mind. And I guess I should throw that in there as well as a part of their day. But for me, the largest question about what Miami did or didn't do was picking up Brian Meredith. But I understand looking at him in USL and Open Cup competitions and things like that. So goalkeeper for me was the largest question coming out of the draft for Inter Miami. So 4 out of 5, that's an 80. So that is what, a B minus?
But you're knocking Miami because they picked up an unproven goalkeeper. I think you're looking at the draft wrong, in my opinion, because the draft doesn't define your team. It's just part of the process of building a team. And neither one, if this is who you are coming out of the draft, if this is who Nashville is, it's not pretty. If this is who Miami is, come on, we know better than that. We know they're going to go out and sign a bunch of bigger name players. That's what they're going to do.
Right.
So you don't base the draft that way. It's what did you do to improve your squad? And Miami got, I think, 2 potential starters on the back line in Sweat and Powell. Although Powell, I do have a few questions about it.
Right.
You got Lee Wynn, who is going to start for you. You got Argudo, who is a depth piece in the middle for you. You did okay. Nashville, you're looking at it where you added Madranda, who I think will be a starter, but I don't know exactly how they're going to play yet. You added Dunlady, Lancaster, Rios. Somebody's going to emerge from that group. I don't know if it's Dunlady. You added Anibaba, who right now is a starter for you, which is okay. You added Joe Willis and Adrian Zendejas. One of them will be a starter, and then you overpaid for the other one, depending on which one starts. And you added Daniel Lovitz, who will be a starter for you on the left side. You created a little bit of redundancy in some spots. Like you have 3 forwards now, and none of them are necessarily proven double-digit goal scorers in this league. You added on the left side Madranda, who could play in the middle as well, but then you have Godoy, McCarty, Jones, Mukhtar all in there already. You have Lovitz on the left side. You have Randall Leal, who's on the left side, but more of an attacking option. So you have some overlap in positions, which is okay for now, depending on what you do with the rest of it. Or you're going to have to move pieces around and get creative. And I don't know. I think Miami is in a better position right now, but mostly that's because we expect Miami to spend big money on game-changing players, and we don't know if Nashville will.
Right.
But this Nashville team, I mean, if you're looking at it from what they did on the day and they won the draft, I don't even know if Nashville did that. They got more bodies.
Yes.
But did they get demonstrably better? The best player that was picked, you could say it's Lee Nguyen, you could say it's Ben Sweat. I would probably go either one out of who was picked. Daniel Lovitz could end up being the best player out of the group that was acquired on the day. I think both of them are in that C type of category. And I'm assuming from what we've seen, and this is what you have to take out of the draft, it's not about exactly what the teams look like right now. It's seeing where they're going. So if you're Miami, I think you're looking at this and you say either they feel really strongly about Meredith or Callender being a starter day one, or they're going to go get a veteran goalkeeper. And they'll probably
which is what I would think.
Goalkeeper as a backup anyway. Well, you don't know. But you have recent history. Tyler Miller, LAFC.
Right.
Kind of worked out for him. So I'm not going to make that assumption that, yes, they're just going to go get somebody. I think they'll have a veteran in the group, but is he going to be a starter? Who knows? So goalkeeper is a question of what they do next. Center back is a question as to what they do next because Lillard and McCoon are going to need some help in there. The biggest thing is just the game-changing attacking talent and where it comes from. Because you have Lee Nguyen, who is a good fit for now. You have Julian Carranza and Matias Pellegrini, two teenagers coming from Argentina. How quick do they hit the ground running? Jerome Kiesewetter is a talented player, but he's coming from El Paso. Does he get up to speed in MLS quickly? You're going to be adding attacking talent on top of that. And Miami, I think we already know that. I think we expect Miami to have a big-name forward. I think we expect Miami to have a big-name probably winger, maybe a number 10 as well. So Miami, from a base perspective, okay, they've got a base. They're going to add a goalkeeper who could challenge for the number 1 shirt. They're going to add a center back. They're going to add maybe another central midfielder, a defensive midfielder, unless you feel like Ulloa is going to be the starter. And you're going to add a bunch of attacking talent. And you've got Pellegrini and Carranza, who could end up being special. Nashville, you have a base of solid guys, but what do you need to where do you need to go from here? You've got goalkeeper, you got 2. You got a left back in Lovitz. You've got center backs in Romney and Anibaba. You've got central midfielders. You're good there. You're not going to go out any more central midfielders. You've got a winger in David Accam, but where does he fit? Does he play as a second forward? Who knows? Is he on the right side? Are you going to play a 4-3-3 now? If you go 4-3-3, you could play Lovitz on the left. You still have a hole on the right. You've got center backs with Anibaba and Romney. You've got a midfield. Probably today, I would go Godoy, McCarty, Mukhtar. Accam on one wing, Leal on the other, and then one of your forwards out of your 3. So you have some depth in certain spots, but you have some holes in other spots, and you just don't know how Nashville's going to fill them.
Right.
And that's what I keep coming back to is Miami, I see where they're going. Nashville, I don't know. Are they going to go fill these spots with MLS free agents, with reentry pickups, with other, trades or signings from around the league? How aggressive are they going to get? Because they traded 2 international slots. And when you're looking for a tell as to how the team's going to build, that's a big one. They're not expecting to have a bunch of international players if you're trading 2 international slots in this one day. Miami, you expect to have a lot of internationals. Nashville, now I think it's fair to say you're not. So where is that game-changing kind of talent going to come from? We're going to have to wait and see. It was an interesting day. I think there's a lot of moves that are going to spark some conversation around the league. I think we will see more moves from these two teams. Next up will be the re-entry draft, the waiver process, free agency, all of those things. We'll give you that timeline and what to be on the look for next in the MLS offseason right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here. Join the conversation on a Wall Pass Wednesday. Tweet at us at Soccer Down here. Give us your expansion draft takes. I think most people expected Atlanta to lose somebody, and Brandon Vasquez was the one that most experts picked. He is the one who was picked, and we talked about this a lot, both on and offline at Wild Heaven last night. I think when it comes to Atlanta United, you're going to replace Brandon Vasquez, and this was the thing that surprised me a little bit when all these conversations started going into the offseason. Like, you might lose player X, Y, Z, Q, T, V, but there wasn't any thought about replacing them. Well, that's something Atlanta United's done really well, is they've went out into the market and added smart signings to their roster. So you're going to replace Brandon Vasquez, and I think you're going to replace him with more of a veteran presence as a second forward, and somebody who, in a perfect world, can play a little bit more or play with Joseph Martinez against certain kinds of opponents or certain situations in matches coming off the bench, and more of an established presence. And for Vasquez, at this point in his career, he needs to go somewhere where he can play, because he's not going to be the number one option up top in Atlanta, not while Joseph Martinez is here. So he's at a roadblock. So it's good for him as a player to go. You thought at first it was going to be Nashville, but then they immediately said, well, we're going to make a move, and it's Cincinnati that he ends up in. He could start next year and start 30 games for Cincinnati. And that's the only way you're going to find out if Brandon Vasquez is the player that we think he can be. I think he can be a double-digit goal scorer in this league. I don't know if it happens next year, but it was never going to happen here because the playing time wasn't going to be there for him. So it's a situation where, you know, you don't want to see players that you've watched for multiple years go, But in this one, honestly, I feel like it's the best situation for everybody involved. Atlanta can go get what they need, which is different, and Vasquez can get a chance to play, which is what he needs.
And that was the biggest thing for me, is that we've seen Brandon in the first couple of years of Atlanta United, and when you're in a position where you're only getting X number of minutes, the occasional start, your Open Cup hero, Brandon Vasquez, and you want to see someone in their career continue to grow and evolve, the best thing was for a change of scenery, you think. And so now that he has that, it'll be and he's going to be someone that obviously Atlanta United fans, and if you looked on social media, you saw how they responded to losing Brandon Vasquez, but, tip of the hat and, go get him in your next place. And that for me is he's going to be another individual that I'm going to sit there and keep an eye on when it comes to MLS match days to see how he's going to be in his new jersey come 2020.
Yeah, he's just got to play to be able to develop into a big-time goal scorer in this league, which he has the potential to be. He has to get playing time, and it wasn't going to come here. So it's the best move for everybody involved. I think Atlanta needs more of a veteran, a guy who is going to understand that role playing behind Joseph Martinez in terms of the depth chart, but also being able to give you something a little different when it's needed, whether paired up with Joseph or getting a start in place of him or coming in to replace him in a match where it's a game. That's what the game calls for. I'll be curious to see how Atlanta United replaces this spot on the depth chart where Brandon Vasquez has been the backup up top for a long time, because you go into this year, you're going to this offseason without Vasquez, without Romario Williams, two guys who've been here as the reserves to Joseph Martinez for a long time. You're going to have to fill that role and expect that you'll see that for this team for sure. So your upcoming calendar in the league, the big date is tomorrow, where it's the club deadline to exercise options. Everything has to be into the league office by 1 o'clock. On Friday, the waiver list will be released. So these are the players who don't meet free agency requirements and don't meet reentry requirements. It's guys who generally are there's not exactly a profile. It's guys who haven't been in the league very long, and it's guys who could be younger. So if you've been in the league multiple years, but you're very young and you're out of contract, you go through waivers. If you're a newcomer to the league, you came in on like a 1-year deal and it's not picked up, or you're out of contract and you're not re-signed, you can go through waivers. That waiver process is November 25th at 3 o'clock. Free agency opens at that time as well. That list of players who will be free agents is also released on Friday. We know Jeff Larentowicz fits into that list. There's others in the league. We just don't know who all of them are just yet. November 26th, next Tuesday, is the reentry draft stage 1. Remember, Miami made a trade to get the first pick in the reentry draft. So they're going to have that. They'll have first pick of players who are available here. These are guys who are either, guys who have been in the league longer. So they're not long enough for free agency, but they've been in the league for a certain period of time to meet this level of movement. Welcome to MLS. It gets crazy. So it's a draft process. You've seen teams use it to pick up solid veterans in the past, and DC United in 2014 is the one that I always remember, where they picked up 3 starters in the reentry process. And it changed their team from being one of the worst in the league in 2013 to one of the best in 2014 because they used this process effectively. Others have picked up key pieces in the reentry draft before. The reentry process will continue on December 3rd with Stage 2. Guys who aren't picked in Stage 1, you're basically picking up their rights, and you can renegotiate at that stage. So you've got some things coming up, and the options is probably the biggest one. You've had a couple clubs release their decisions on players with options. I would expect to see more of those released today around the league. And anybody who hasn't, it would come out tomorrow, because the deadline to actually have it go to the league is 1 o'clock tomorrow. We know in Atlanta you have option years, at least according to reports that have not been 100% verified but haven't been disputed yet. Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez, Julian Gressel, Florentine Pogba, all on options. Tito Villalba has been mentioned as being on an option as well, and I'm not as sure on that one, but you're talking about option years for all of them. I would be surprised I'd be shocked if options aren't picked up on all of them but Pogba. Pogba is the trickiest one because of what his salary was this year. Was it a show and prove kind of deal where it was a salary in the first year and then it goes up dramatically in year 2 if you like what you see? Is it around the same number? There's so many unknowns when it comes to Pogba, because even the number he's on now, that's a number that most teams are going to be expecting starting level minutes out of. And in Atlanta, you have Miles Robinson, you have Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez right now as center backs. There's not going to be starting level minutes unless you're going to play in a 3-back setup predominantly next year, which is possible. Maybe, maybe not. And is Pogba that guy? He's the trickiest one based off the numbers. The other guys, even if, and we know about long-term contracts, it's a different conversation with Gressel and LGP. You're not going to miss on picking up the option on those. So the option, it's something that gets, I think, freaked out about a lot, but the bigger picture when it comes to Gressel and Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez is signing them to a long-term deal or making the decision that you can't or you're not going to do that, and then making the right move to benefit your team across the board. But the option getting picked up is kind of a no-brainer.
Couple of questions on the board this morning from Wall Pass Wednesday. And the first one's from Emery Russell about where we are right now. He says, what position do you see as the most important to fill this offseason in regards to the team's depth, attacking, midfield, or defense?
In regard to depth, it's attack. It's a second forward now. In terms of potentially starting or a different kind of player than what you have, I think it's a defensive midfielder in number 6. I think having a true number 6 who is comfortable in a perfect world playing by themselves in front of a back 3 or 4, it's something that you might not necessarily have what you want in that position right now. Because you look at the rest of the group, you have your starting goalkeeper in Brad Gazan, you have your outside backs in Bello and Escobar. In a 4, you have options in a 5 or 3 center backs with Gressel playing as a wing back as well. Escobar played as a center back in a 3, so you have that possibility. You've got pretty good coverage there. You might feel like you need an additional center back. The 6 is the one that I think you could be looking at a different kind of player there to start. Assuming that the people that are on the roster now are coming back, and Emerson Hyndman would be a big one. I think the fact that you protected him and traded so much to get his rights this season, I would expect him to be back. I think your central midfield in general, the depth is good. I think your attacking options with Barco, with Pitti, Gressel potentially factoring in there in a 4-3-3. Tito Villalba, you have to make a decision there on his contract and where it stands. You've got some depth. You've got Andrew Carlton as well, and he's a player that next year has to be more involved in the first team and has to be playing minutes, whether it's off the bench or starting some or in a rotation. You need that backup forward, though. That's the glaring one now with Vasquez's departure, is that you're going to need depth there. So I think you're going into the market shopping for a number 6, a defensive midfielder, a backup forward, depth at center back, and maybe depth on the wing, maybe. I think those are the big things you're doing. But the biggest thing that you're going to be figuring out in the offseason is long-term deals when it comes to Gressel to LGP and what results from that. I think that's the number one priority is contracts of guys that you currently have and how long are they going to be on your depth chart. When you have your depth chart in positions and you have the names on it and you have that number next to it, how many years they're under contract, what's that number going to look like for some guys at the end of this offseason? That's going to be the key for me.
Also, Shiva wanted to know, and this is going backwards leading into the draft, who were the 12 players Atlanta protected?
I actually did work back through it. I mean, it's not that important, honestly, but let me pull it up because I worked backwards because somebody else had asked me this. So it was Adams, Barco, Escobar, LGP, Gressel, Gazan, Heineman, Pitti, Joseph, Remetti, Robinson, Villalba. Those are the ones that were protected. The homegrowns were automatically protected, and you didn't have to protect them.
Unrelated piece of developing story out of Philadelphia. Quickly, Tom Bogert is saying that the Union have declined Marco Fabian's 2020 contract option and will not extend an offer to out-of-contract midfielder Harris Medunjanin, the source tells MLSsoccer.com.
The Medunjanin one's a little surprising. He's also 34, so that's a big one. That's a big hole you're going to have to replace if you're Philadelphia. Fabian, I'm not shocked that's the case because he didn't deliver what they expected him to be. Fabian, in his MLS stay, started 15 matches, scored 7 goals, 1 assist, played 1,249 minutes. You got to get more than that if you're going to pay him what you paid him. So I understand that one. He just did not completely deliver for them. So you can add another player in that kind of role. Medunjanin is a little more surprising because this is a guy who's been the linchpin of a good Union midfield for a couple of years now. He is 34. He will be 35 very early in the 2020 season. 3 years in Philadelphia, started every match but 5. Started every match this past season, played every minute of every match, had 10 assists, had 12 assists in 2017. So you're talking about a player in 3 years that played just under 100 matches in MLS, 5 goals, 29 assists. And I think more importantly, you look deeper at the numbers and how the Union play. Medunjanin was critical to their central midfield in terms of being the bulk of their possession. That was who they played through in a holding role. Don't even get into the free kicks and what he gave you there. This guy it's going to be tough to replace him. There's not a lot of players like him out there. Now, his age, you had to wonder about it, but it didn't look like he dropped off at all this year because he played every minute. So don't think there's much of a drop-off there. You go into the next level on numbers on him. One of the league leaders this season in passes per match. 75 passes per match for the Union. That was up from his previous 2 years. And completed them at a very high rate. So how do you replace a Medunjanin if you're the Union? Does Bedoya become more of that sit and stay at home role as he gets a little bit older, and then you go find an 8 to replace him? Maybe. Do you go out and use Ernst Tanner's network? Hit the Rolodex. Go find a player who can come in at a younger age and give you what Medunjanin has given you. That's a really important role in that team. And the Union are a team that I think have to upgrade to get into the next group in MLS. And now they have to make moves just to stay where they're at. because they didn't get what they wanted out of Fabian, and Medunjanin is a huge person to replace for them. A little surprising.
And, yeah, that came out about 20 minutes ago. And with all of the discussions we've been having, and I think that you phrased it the best in saying it's like, okay, to get to where you are, you now have to build back instead of being at a place where you were and looking to build forward. You now have to rebuild to stay and maintain.
Yeah, I think with Medunjanin, it's just you didn't see any drop off from him. You still, and Bogert talks about in the article, you still got to figure out, are you going to be able to have Jamiro Montero back? He was on loan from FC Metz. Are you going to be able to get that deal done? Because if you're losing from your midfield, Medunjanin and Montero, Brendan Aronson is going to play more minutes, and he'll be the 10. Bedoya could turn into a 6. I think he has that ability in him. I think he can pick up the bulk of the passing in their possession game. Okay. But then you've got to hit on that right replacement. And it's something that I think we've always been a little skeptical of the Union going out into the market and what they're going to do. Now, this is a different group. This is Ernst Tanner in year 2. He's putting his stamp on it. Jim Curtin has some job security now, so they're able to, I think, change what we expect from the Philadelphia Union. They're going to have to, because this is a group right now with these 2 holes in their roster. They could go either way, and it opens up a door a little bit in the East. I mean, you look at right now going into 2020, Toronto ended up winning the East through the playoffs. They will be in that mix. Atlanta will be in that mix. New York City, bringing most of their talent back. They have a hole at manager. If it's Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, do we expect it to be? I'm not going to expect a big drop-off, but are they going to be able to maintain right where they're at? Might be a work in progress. So you got those 3 that feel like they're a step above. Philadelphia was right there next, that with the right moves you felt like could jump up. Now you've got to make the right moves to stay or jump up. You've got the Red Bulls, who the talk is Aaron Long is not shying away from saying he wants to play in England, and now there's rumors that there are offers from England and substantial ones. So you lose him. Are you going to go out and replace him? You didn't go out and replace Tyler Adams. Do you have guys coming through Red Bulls too that can step in and replace these guys? I don't think they're there yet. So, if you're replacing Aaron Long with Sean Nealis, for example, I think there's a drop-off. So I don't know if Red Bulls get back into that group. Does DC, who were 5th in the league in the Eastern Conference this past year, well, they're losing Rooney and Acosta. They've got issues with Hamid. They've got to figure out Lucas Rodriguez, bringing him back. They are bringing Yamil Assad back. Is that enough for them to get into that next mix? Not yet. Montreal, there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of talk. Are they going to take that step up that we've always expected them to do? You got to see it with the roster first. You got to see it with Thierry Henry first. New England, I think, can take the step up. And we see what they do in the offseason. I feel like maybe now it's New England who is ahead of that group as we sit today on the 20th with Medunjanin and with Fabian leaving Philadelphia. New England is the one that's on the precipice of joining the elite group in the Eastern Conference more than anybody else.
So, and as I'm trying to sit here and I'm staring at the standings from last season, and I'm trying to sit here and say, right, the
While
top
you're doing
group.
That, though, the other thing is Miami, because it opens a door for Miami to say, oh, well, look at these teams that are kind of wobbling a little bit in the East. Can we get into that number 4 spot? Yeah. If they go out and make the right signings and hit on them, sure. Atlanta did it in 17. LAFC did it in 18. They both hosted playoff games in their first year. Miami could do that too if they get their signings right, because the door's open.
Yep. And I had Miami, before we got into players and drafts and things like that, philosophy and what we were hearing in press conferences and such, I had Miami chasing after a playoff spot. I did not anticipate and do not anticipate Nashville getting into being the 8 and chasing the 7 or something like that.
I had in the East too.
Right, true. Point taken. So I had always appeared in my brain that Miami was going to be making that push like an LAFC, like an Atlanta United, to make that first-year splash and do whatever they thought they needed to do to be a part of the playoff picture. And with these questions that we now have in the East, I think that obviously looking at the other teams that were below the playoff bar, Chicago, you have things you want to do. I want to see who you bring in. Montreal, same thing. Columbus, yes, you're adding Darlington Nagbe, but who else are you adding? Orlando City questions, FC Cincinnati questions. I think that Miami can make that push and be north of the playoff bar with the signings that we anticipate them making, meaning big name in quotation marks. And I just did air quotes here in the office. So, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Miami north of the playoff bar. Can they make that push for the top 5 or top 4?
Potentially. I mean, they've got to get the signings right, and that's what LA and Atlanta did in their first years, and we'll see if Miami can do the same. Any questions on where things stand right now, expansion draft, Atlanta, et cetera, before we go to break?
Yes. Bart, it's more of a statement at the moment. Bart says, I think Miami did a better job in the draft because they had a clear vision for how they're building their team in year one. They have a backline now and can go spend buckets of money on attacking talent.
Yeah, it's kind of where I'm at too. We don't truly know, and we won't, I'd say, until midseason. But I feel like we have a better sense of what Miami is doing than Nashville. Nashville, it does feel at times like a player becomes available, and I do like that player. Here's a lot of stuff, like Anibal Godoy last year when they brought him in. It was a big outlay for him. The 2 goalkeepers in this one, you went and got 2 of them here, and you paid a lot for Zendejas, who you would expect to be the backup. Can he be the starter in a couple of years? Yeah, he could. He could be the starter now. I mean, he's a guy who sat behind Tim Melia for a while in Kansas City. But then why did you go get Joe Willis, what you got him for? What Nashville is doing is a little more muddled. I think what we expect Miami to be doing, it's a little clearer, and the pathways and the depth chart and all that is more wide open for where we think they're going to add pieces.
And we've also had a lot of folks chiming in about last night and how cool they thought that was. When it comes to the expansion draft, sir, we are officially caught up.
Okay. We're not. I saw one from Tofka.
Nope.
So,
Tofka?
Yeah. Okay. We are assuming Conway, Okonkwo, and Kunga just aren't ready for MLS minutes, ? Okonkwo, I don't know. He wasn't ready for USL minutes on a regular basis. So, no on him. I don't know if he's back next year, by the way. Kunga was loaned out to Memphis, and I thought did pretty well, but he's not a forward. He's a winger. So that doesn't fit into the backup forward role. Conway, he's going to be 18 next year, and he's coming off his first professional year. You don't have to rush him. So then Tofka says possibilities for a new forward. One, he mentions Bienveni Kanakimana back on a first-team deal. Again, more of a winger, not what you're looking for here. Rubio Rubin and Obafemi Martins are the other 2. Would they come in and accept being the number 2 and the clear number 2 and play 30 games in all competitions and start 10? Would they accept that? And that's always the question, and we have this conversation a lot. When you're looking at certain spots on your roster, it's not just best player available. You have to think about role and fit and situation, and you can't always add starting level talent across the board when you're going to be playing in reserve roles. You know, Obafemi Martins, for example, older player now, would he be willing to take that kind of role? Maybe now he would, where he wouldn't have a couple of years ago, but you don't know. it's not easy. You know, another name that came up last night from Kevin, and it's a player that I've liked for a long time. He's coming off an injury, and that's what creates the question marks around him. But a player like Will Bruin, who is a veteran and at this stage has accepted more of a reserve role in Seattle this past year, playing behind Raul Ruidiaz before he was injured. Will Bruin is that type of forward who is a different forward than Joseph. And that's the bigger thing when you talk about, Kunga and Kanakimana, who are wingers anyway. But they're more similar to Joseph. I think what you need in this role as a second forward or a guy who can come off the bench and either play with Joseph or replace him if you get into that situation, you don't need the same player. You need a different type of player. And Martin's a little bit, he's bigger, but he still plays in a similar fashion. Could he be a big target number 9? Something that I think we always expected Brandon Vasquez to be, but maybe he isn't. Maybe he is a player who plays like a smaller player, or like Tata Martino always saw him, can play out wide. Don't know. But I think you need that number 9. And Will Bruin would be a player like that. There's plenty of others around the world, and it's the story we always talk about with this. We can go through players that you might know, but the right signing might be a player you don't know, because he could be a veteran player playing in the Netherlands, playing in Argentina, playing in Spain, playing wherever. And you might not know him straight away, but he might be the right fit. That's, I think, where we're at with this roster build and what we're expecting out of Atlanta United in the offseason. That's the position that now has become higher on the priority list with the departure of Vasquez, because you don't really have a true replacement for Joseph right now on the depth chart for 2020. And I don't think Jackson Conway's there. I think that's a big ask for him right now. I do think he can turn into that. I really do. I was so impressed with Jackson Conway last season in USL. For a player his age to get the minutes he did and show the maturity that he did, I think the sky is definitely very bright when it comes to Conway. But do you want to thrust him into this role where, because this is the key for this role, do you want to take minutes away from Jackson Conway in USL Championship to be on 18 in MLS and not play necessarily, or be tasked with coming in and rescuing a game in the final 20 minutes? Or do you want him to play with Atlanta United 2, where he's under contract for this year, and be primarily with them this season and start and play 2,000 minutes? I'd go for that right now, but what I would love to see, if he earns it, is game time for him in the U.S. Open Cup in that first round game, and you see where you go from there. That's something we haven't really seen Atlanta United use yet, is the Open Cup, to kind of give these young players with the twos an opportunity to get a taste. And Conway would be one that, if his play early in the season earns it, I'd love to see him get that opportunity, and I think we'd have a better sense of it then. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. We're going to get Mike Conte on the line, follow up with him on last night, and all the moves from the expansion draft. Hang out with us. We'll be right back.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire, and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here. November 20th. Expansion draft is in the rearview mirror. Now we're waiting on option announcements. There's another one that's just crossed the pathway. Keaton Parks reportedly returning to Benfica after his year with New York City, where he was on loan. Add that to the Philadelphia moves, and today could be a pretty big day in MLS in terms of announcements. So stay tuned to all of your social media channels. We'll be talking about it later on Stoppage Time, facebook.com/99thegame. Myself, Jimmy Vance, and Mike Conti. What's up, Mike?
What's going on, guys?
Fun.
Yeah, I was going to say your biggest takeaway from last night hanging out at a table with Kevin and Jason. We got into pronunciations as one of the bigger takeaways from last night and how much fun that can be sometimes.
My biggest takeaway was 2 hours wasn't long enough.
No.
I know, it was crazy.
I feel like we barely scratched the surface. It was a lot of fun. It was great to see everyone. Great questions. Is that going to be posted as a podcast?
Yes.
Man, I'll tell you what, if you listen to it, just have a long car trip ready because we went for quite a while. And we're going to have to do it again because, like I said, we barely scratched the surface. We told some good stories. I think there were plenty more we didn't get into, but it's a lot of fun. Really cool hanging out with Kevin. He has a much different perspective than us because he's got a different lens through which he looks both MLS and Atlanta United. But I really had a great time and looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do that on a semi-regular basis because it's just a fun opportunity to get everybody together and talk about how things have been going and then tell silly stories about who knows what. The expansion draft happened before we got started. I thought we'd have a bunch of questions about the expansion draft, but we really only had the one, and it was related to Brandon Vasquez being picked by Nashville and then being dealt to Cincinnati. You know, we talked about it last night. I think you and I are kind of on the same page. Like, for Vasquez's career, this is really what he needs personally because the playing time that he needs at this stage, he wasn't going to get that here.
No, not unless, God forbid, something long-term happened to Joseph. And that's the thing. I think he'll be able to go to Cincinnati. And it's something that Kevin said last night. Cincinnati's a great city, passionate soccer following. I think they were third in the league in attendance this year for a team that was really struggling. I mean, it's a great soccer market. Brandon's going to go up there and be a superstar among the fans and the supporters there. And I think he has the potential to be a very, very good MLS player. And this is a team on which he can go in right away and start 34 games if he stays healthy and maybe score double-digit goals. I think it's absolutely a possibility for him there. I hate it for Atlanta United. I was not naive enough to think that Atlanta United was not going to have a player taken in this expansion draft. I mean, the numbers just told you that the probability was that Atlanta United was going to have a player taken. This was the one that I thought was most likely to get selected because of all the reasons that we outlined. I think he has shown a ton of potential, but just wasn't able to get consistent playing time here. It hurts Atlanta United to lose him because now who's your backup striker? And you, Jason, and John, you too. I mean, you could probably speak a lot better to what's coming down through ATL UTD2 and through the academy. But right now, you don't have an obvious reserve striker on this team, and you're going to now have to go out and find one. And that's going to just be one more thing added to the list for Carlos and Darren. Carlin, I guess I just condensed their names. Carlos and Darren.
Two minds acting as one.
Right, but now you got to go out and find one. You brought up Will Bruin last night. Someone like that who's big and physical, and I guess he's hurt, and that's basically why he didn't play much for Seattle this year. But someone who can give you a little bit of size is going to be important, because you're going to need someone that you can bring off the bench, you can bring an immediate scoring punch, but also a set-piece target in a situation where you might be chasing a late goal.
And I think somebody who's going to be accepting of the role, and this is crosses all sports, and I feel like really top teams that build a group have those kinds of players who accept whether they are just a player who has never broken through to be that starter and they're a super sub, or a player who's later in their career and has accepted, you know what, it's better for me to be in Atlanta with a winning team and contribute to trophies than to be starting on a bad team and playing more but not enjoying it. And I think good teams go out and find those guys, and that's the kind of guy it feels like Atlanta really needs.
Yeah, I agree. And this is an enticing destination, especially for a veteran player who might be kind of at the precipice of the end of his career. Where you can come to Atlanta, you can be a superstar in a huge market for the sport and compete for trophies. That's a really good kind of poker chip that Darren and Carlos can throw on the table when they're recruiting a player like that. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be hard to twist the arm of a veteran player to say, hey, come to Atlanta. You're not going to play 34 games, but you're going to be a star, and you're going to be richly compensated for it. So I'm not saying it'll be easy for Darren and Carlos, but I think it will be easier for them as opposed to, someone with, I don't know, probably at least 15 other clubs in MLS where you can't boast of the same opportunities that you would get in Atlanta.
Michael Ruiz has put a couple of names out there this morning. He was looking at guys like Patrick Mullins or Quincy Amarikwa for potentials as a back
kind of player, but Mullins is a good shout.
Yeah, and Mullins, I know New Orleans is not Atlanta, but Mullins at least is from this part of the country. So, I guess you could kind of sort of sell it as a homecoming opportunity for him.
NFC South, baby.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I guess, Houston's probably a little bit closer geographically to New Orleans. But, yeah, there would be that aspect of it. I like Mullins a lot.
Smart player.
A smart player and someone who excelled as a sub. And, again, I think that's what you're looking for here, right? God willing, Joseph is going to be out there for 34 MLS matches, but you can't depend on that. People do get hurt. People do get called into international duty. So I think I love that Mullins shout a lot. I think that's great. I would be starting there. I don't know what his contract situation is. I don't know. Your opportunity to make a trade is probably not the best at the moment. But I don't know what his contract situation is. But that type of player would be perfect for what you're looking for.
When you look at the expansion draft yesterday, Mike, you look at Inter Miami and you look at Nashville SC from 30,000 feet. What'd you see?
It's some really good players got taken. I think New York City will miss Ben Sweat a lot. I think Minnesota will miss Abu Danladi a lot. I love what Nashville did going out and getting Joe Willis. And for Houston to get Zarek Valentin for him, I don't know if Willis was exposed or not in this draft, but that was good work by Houston to at least get something.
I think he was. Yeah, I don't think he was.
Either way, you got something good for him.
Right.
So I think Inter Miami may have missed an opportunity to get a strong goalkeeper. It's no slight on Brian Meredith, but he's a career backup. So I don't know if the idea is for Brian Meredith to be their starting keeper, if he's going to be a backup there. Lee Wynn, I think, is a good veteran to bring into Inter Miami. I think that really hurts LAFC, which is not a really deep team to begin with. Now they lose probably their best option off the bench. And again, who knows what these teams are going to be doing in the offseason. This is truly a 30,000-foot view. But I think a lot of good players got taken yesterday. I think the best pick of the draft was Ben Sweat by Miami. I love that. I was a little surprised to see Miami go left back, right back with their first two picks, and they didn't take a forward at all. And again, I don't know what Paul's plan is down there, and they have something in the pipe.
They had some on the roster too.
Yeah. So, and again, I mean, in the expansion draft, I think Cincinnati kind of proved this last year. You're not looking for 5 starters necessarily. I mean, you're looking for 5 guys. And if you can get a couple players that can help you out immediately, that's great. But that's not necessarily what you have to do in the expansion draft. I think Nashville may have fallen a little bit more into the Cincinnati strategy where, Abu Danladi probably goes in there and starts right away. But, Jimmy Medranda hasn't stayed healthy at all in his career. So that's
healthy,
almost
I like that. But, yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, he just can't stay healthy. But so it's almost like you take a flyer on him, and if it works out, great. Jaleel Anababa,
solid.
Didn't start a ton for New England. He's a nice player. But I feel like Nashville kind of filled out their bench, their depth chart a little bit more than, say, Miami, which went out and got some potential starters, just as I see it.
Yeah, I kind of looked at it that Miami, I feel like we have a sense of what Miami will be based off what they've said, what they did yesterday, where the holes in the roster are. It feels a little more clear at the moment. Nashville feels a little more muddled. Like now you've got 3 up top with Dunladi. You already had Cameron Lancaster and Daniel Rios that you had signed to MLS deals that played for you in USL this past year. Both are talented players. Lancaster scored a boatload of goals in USL. Does that translate to MLS? We'll have to wait and see. Rios is a guy out of Chivas de Guadalajara, so you would expect him to be able to raise this game to an MLS level, but all 3 have question marks. You have 2 goalkeepers now, and you had to pay a decent bit to get both yesterday because you added Adrian Zendejas. I would assume that Willis is the number 1 going in, but Zendejas has been sitting behind Tim Melia for a while, and you paid a lot to get him.
Yeah.
You've got 5 guys in the middle of the field with Godoy, McCarty, Derek Jones, Hani Mukhtar. Medranda could play there if he's not going to play on the left. But then on the left, you have Randall Leal from Costa Rica, but you also went out and got Daniel Lovitz. And I think a good deal. I think it was a good trade. You didn't give up a ton to get Lovitz, who's a national team level left back. But I just don't know where Nashville goes from here exactly. Whereas Miami, I think, okay, you've got your base. Now you're going to go spend on excitement.
Yeah, and you have a shadow manager apparently pushing some buttons in the draft war room. Yeah. That cracked me up. A shadow manager.
He had input. We don't know who he is yet.
I love the whole, theater of the mind that they were trying to portray with the draft show on MLSsoccer.com yesterday. The league will never admit to this, but I'm pretty sure they do a conference call maybe an hour or 2 before the actual quote-unquote draft show, and that the results are known way before 5:30.
No way. Mookie Betts didn't know who he was reading until he got
frozen envelope.
Paper.
Well, okay, maybe it's conspiratorial, but when they show a live shot of the Miami draft war room, and it's Paul McDonough at a high top table at a bar drinking a Heineken, I'm going to be a little bit skeptical as to whether or not the selections have already been made.
Jorge B. wanted to know what the possibility of that shadow manager was if it was Mauricio Pochettino.
It's funny. When he was sacked yesterday, I immediately texted Jason. I said, is there any chance Pochettino could be the Miami manager? But Jason made a good point that it is highly unlikely that Pochettino was negotiating with Miami when he was still
instant input. He gets sacked by the Spurs. He's giving Paul McDonough instant input on the expansion draft, and those are the guys that he wants.
Hey, I mean, look at what Spurs did this morning. I mean, it's pretty obvious that this just didn't all happen yesterday, that wheels had been spinning for at least a couple days. So who knows? Who knows? But it sure sounds like Miami has their guy and has probably had him for a little while, and they probably have to wait to make that announcement because that guy might still be employed at the moment.
You want some peak MLS on one of the trades Nashville made? Because now it makes a little more sense. We were just talking about Zendejas, and man, they gave up a lot for Zendejas. I'm confused. So Ben Wright, who writes for Soccer Speedway, one of the really good Nashville sites out there right now, Nashville had an agreement with Kansas City to leave Jimmy Medranda unprotected. So the trade with Zendejas in some ways involved Medranda as well, because players in the expansion draft have to be added to the senior roster. So by drafting Medranda and in trading for Zendejas and not drafting him, Zendejas can be on that supplemental or reserve roster and not take up one of the 20.
Okay.
So they had to swing it that way to get what they wanted. So the 175 in allocation money and an international spot is essentially for Medranda and Zendejas and the way you want them on the roster.
There you go. See,
makes a little more sense.
Roster massage.
There's some 3D chess being played around this league right now that guys like me would never understand.
It's the same with any league with a salary cap. It just gets so complicated with some of these moves and how you have to navigate it. But that makes a lot more sense when you look at it as a whole, because the Zendejas move, I just didn't get why you were giving up that much for potentially a backup goalkeeper.
Right. Yeah. Now you know. Now you know. Again, I think looking at it realistically, what Nashville did yesterday was smart, prudent, forward-thinking. You drafted 3 guys under the age of 26. Medranda falls into that flyer category a little bit, where if he stays healthy, it's an extremely low-risk, high-reward type of pick. Whereas, again, Miami was going for a little more impact. And that's fine. And that's probably reflective of where those two franchises are as a whole right now. And we talked about this last night at Wild Haven, how, the success that Atlanta United and LAFC have had in the last 3 years, I think actually puts a little bit of pressure on a team like Miami, where the bar's been set. Like, there are teams in their second year that are either winning the Cup or winning Supporter Shield. You've got 2 years to get to that level. And, oh, by the way, we expect playoffs in year 1 because LAFC and Atlanta United did that too. I think in a market like Miami, which is a little bit fickle as a professional sports market, there is going to be pressure on Miami to get to the playoffs this year. And I think they're constructing their roster and probably their technical staff with that in mind.
Well, I mean, Mike, we looked at the Eastern Conference, and we both agreed, and Jason had them, if they get all of their transactions correct, that they could be a 4 or a 5. And I had them north of the playoff bar immediately, considering the questions that you have now in Philadelphia as of this morning with Red Bulls and with DC United, that if Miami gets things right, they could be chasing after that first round playoff home game.
Not to mention New York City, who's replacing their manager and has lost Ben Sweat and lost Keaton Parks. And I want to say that might not be the extent of it, that there might be more. But then again, I mean, look at Atlanta. I mean, now again, we expect them to do things, but as it stands right now, they've lost Darlington Nagbe and Brandon Vasquez and reportedly Mikey Ambrose. So it might be a little bit unfair of us to ask these types of questions. Like Philadelphia is a good example, where Harris Medunjanin I understand he's 35 years old, but he looked pretty fit to me this year. Was one of the top 10 in MLS in minutes played, if I remember correctly. And they've let him go.
I think he played every minute.
I want to say you're right, Jason. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure. And they let him go. So, what's coming up behind that? I think we have to maybe just take a deep breath here and not make snap judgments on what all these Eastern Conference teams have done until we see the entire picture. And the CBA might be in play for some of this as well. I mean, I think teams are going to be very, very cautious about going out and signing players right now because we don't know what the CBA is going to look like. It's easier to decline options and open up roster spots and shed salary than it is to take on salary right now because we don't know what the salary structure is going to be.
Yeah, Brad Stuver gave an interview to Glenn Crooks. Stuver's the New York City player rep in the MLSPA, and I believe he was one of the primary people at the media availability they had ahead of MLS Cup. And a couple of things that stood out to me in that, the charter flights, it's something a lot of people have talked about, and he made it clear. The way he put it was he wants to see a mandatory number of charter flights to be used, which it hasn't been really brought up that way. And when you talk about Philadelphia, for example, having them but not using them, they want to come at it from that perspective, is that you have to use a certain number. Makes sense. The biggest one was on the roster stuff, and this he echoed what other players and the union leadership have said. They don't like TAM especially. They're not a fan of GAM. They're not a fan of that stuff. They want it to be one salary cap, put it all together, and go from there, and let teams make mistakes or do it right or whatever, and just have a cap that would throw TAM and GAM into it. And your cap would go from about $4 million to, without an increase of just throwing the allocation money in, you're probably talking roughly around $8-9 million.
Yeah.
Be easier to understand.
Be a lot easier to understand. I think, again, what it comes down to is, we can get bogged down on GAM, TAM, and what the final salary cap number is, but where it's going to come down to whether or not we have a work stoppage is how are the rank and file players going to feel? And does a rank and file player see their $70,000 salary double because the salary cap is being doubled? The way you've described it, I'm not quite clear if it does.
I agree.
So that I think is, I mean, again, if we're looking at it purely in terms of whether or not there'd be a work stoppage, probably 70% of the players' union right now are in that category where they're not making GAM or they're not making TAM money, or they're not making designated player money. And what benefit are they going to see to all of this? That's what I think it comes down to.
The other thing that Stuver said, and it was a good point going back to the last negotiation in 2015, that CBA expired and they continued into training camp, because I think the expiration was actually before training camp started. And they continued on because they were negotiating in good faith at that point. They felt like they were both making progress. He said, we continued all the way up until the weekend of the first game because we were negotiating in good faith. It's one of those things where it all depends on where negotiations are at. I guess we'll have to wait and see where we're at come January 31st, whether we continue to play in good faith or we just stop everything and wait for the best deal at hand. He did open that door that hadn't really been opened before.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, again, we have to look at the realistic possibility of a work stoppage. I say that only because we have not heard that negotiations are in progress.
They
have
are.
you?
Yeah, they've talked about that. We don't know to what degree, but yeah, they've had conversations, they've negotiated. We just don't know where it stands, and that's the biggest unknown. Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, until we get to the point where we know that face-to-face meetings are occurring, and maybe they are, I don't know, but I think maybe the league and the players' union would be well served to maybe publicize the fact that there are advanced talks going on, at least just to put some minds at ease, because I think it's a real concern. It's a real concern for fans. It's a real concern for fans of the teams that are in Concacaf Champions League. So just to get a little bit of substance to prove that something is in progress, I think would put a lot of people at ease.
There was something else that was going on last night, simultaneously to you and Jason and Kevin sitting around a table and answering questions. And the U.S. took care of business. I figured it would behoove us to talk about that with you here before you got to go. U.S. did what they were supposed to do last night, took care of Cuba and the Caymans.
Goes back to what I said Friday night, though. Like, the U.S. men's national team probably played two really, really good matches, had two really good performances over the weekend. And, well, all right, great. It was against Canada and Cuba. And that's a shame, because I think we need to be focused on the quality, not the opponent. But that's where we are with the men's national team right now. They don't get the benefit of any doubt. And they don't deserve it. They don't deserve the benefit of the doubt right now. Believe me, I think I've been pretty clear on that. So, I mean, good to see they're playing well. Where do you go from here? I mean, now you have to sustain it. 4-0 at a neutral site over Cuba last night, that's a good result. That's a really, really good result at a neutral site. I'm pleased with that. Obviously, we didn't pay attention to it because we were doing our event. But just looking at the score line, and the statistics, that's good. That's very, very good. Have to build on it now. Have to sustain it. And, that'll be the challenge for Greg Berhalter going forward, I guess.
Got to win a semifinal in Nations League against Honduras and get to a final with Mexico, and then you get direct comparisons with the U.S. about a year later playing in a final of a competition with a trophy on the line against Mexico. And we'll see what progress has been made in the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they obviously made progress from the first legs against Cuba and Canada. There's no question about it. They've made progress. So that's good. I mean, if that has happened, I need to give Greg Berhalter the credit for that. But it's just the sad thing about where the U.S. men's national team is right now, because had they not improved, had they not looked better, and still maybe had gotten wins, I think we'd probably be having a different discussion right now.
Definitely that. Well, we'll see what else happens around MLS between now and 2 o'clock when we're on Facebook on the 92.9 The Game page with stoppage time. There could be some more options that are announced. Could be more things popping off. I think we have plenty to talk about.
I think so, too. And at some point, we're going to have to get some clarity on this Mikey Ambrose thing, right? I mean, he tweeted a farewell, but he wasn't taking an expansion draft. So
we'll get it. I believe the list comes out Friday of players who are available for waivers and reentry, and those are players who are either out of contract or their option has not been picked up. And we don't know which of those categories Mikey Ambrose was in, but to come out and say, thank you, I won't be back.
Yeah,
it's one of the two.
They've obviously told him something.
Right. It's either he's out of contract and they're not going to do a new one, or he had an option and it's not being picked up.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. 2 o'clock on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page. Definitely looking forward to it, guys.
Plenty to talk about. See you then, Mike.
Okay, see ya.
Be good.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this with more on a Wall Pass Wednesday.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Wall Pass Wednesday. Soccer Down Here. Join the conversation on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. Let us know what you're thinking about this Wednesday. A lot of people are thinking about what's going on in the Premier League. Craziness yesterday because of the timing that Tottenham drops a release out that Mauricio Pochettino no longer with the club. I mean, it gave the impression that it was mutual. The whole situation from, honestly, what, you want to go back to the winter window last year? Maybe even before that, because the Manchester United talk with Pochettino had been big for a long time, and Spurs didn't want him to go, but then didn't want to spend on upgrading the roster. He somehow took that team to a Champions League final. Now they've started just incredibly poorly. You got guys who are going to be out of contract at the end of the season. You've got unrest. You've got all kinds of issues. And who do you turn to fix it? Jose Mourinho comes back in from the wilderness. And Tottenham has went from a team that I think, from a neutral perspective, and I'm not talking to Spurs fans here right now, I'm talking about neutrals. I think people generally had a warm feeling towards Spurs after their run in Champions League and the emotion that you saw from Pochettino, and he's a very likable guy, I think, until he seemed to get very goth there towards the end and would be very down.
Yeah.
But a very, just a good feeling about this team. It was very exciting for them to get to their first Champions League final. And now that feeling completely and utterly flips when you bring in the Darth Vader of the world game. And Mourinho, he's not going to be there for a long time, and he's going to create chaos, and he's going to start arguments, and he's going to be abrasive. Is that going to be what this team needs? Because, I need to go back and double-check a couple of things, but I don't remember Mourinho ever coming into a team that is in Tottenham's situation right now, where you've got 3-4 key players who are out of contract at the end of the year and can sign pre-contracts in the January window wherever they want to go and join them after the season's over. You've got all the issues reportedly of an owner and a chief executive that don't want to spend money. Mourinho likes to spend money, so that's going to be interesting. You've got a team that, more importantly, is in 14th place. A team that, has got to stay up. So I don't remember him being in this situation. Normally he comes in and he wins pretty quickly. And the conversation on the football show this morning on Sirius XMFC was Neil Barnett saying that he thinks Spurs will win the FA Cup because Mourinho's there right now. I don't think they're at that point. Mourinho, I don't know how much of a relegation threat Spurs is truly in with the talent they have. But, man, Mourinho can have a negative effect. And he's coming into a different kind of position. Do they handle this well? I don't know if they do.
6 points north of the relegation zone right now. And honestly, you look at who's in the relegation zone right now. Watford, Southampton, Norwich, 8 points, 8 points, 7 points. Watford has only lost one of their last 5, but they've drawn 3 of them. Southampton's lost 4 of their last 5. Norwich has lost 4 of their last 5. Spurs, tied with Everton, ahead of them on goal difference alone, and it's 6 points between 18th and where you are right now. Newcastle has won 3 of their last 5. They are now north of you. You can make a big dent this upcoming weekend because you've got a game against West Ham, and West Ham is 1 point below you in the standings right now at 13th. But you look at everybody who's above Spurs. But I will also say this, that when you look at 5th through 16th, 4 points difference among all of that. Sheffield United, Arsenal, 17. Manchester United, Wolves, Bournemouth, 16. Burnley, Brighton, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, 15. Tottenham, 14 points. So theoretically, there's some room that can be made up in a hurry, but you're also 6 points above the drop.
I don't know. They play Chelsea and Manchester United in the next month, which will be loads of fun, and everyone in the English media will have lots of fun with that one. The storylines will be endless. It's going to be... I don't know. I did not expect it to happen like this. Now the question is for Pochettino, what happens next? And Barnett again this morning, which surprised me a bit. And I don't know if he's necessarily wrong, but I don't know if he's coming to that conclusion from the same place. And you got to remember, Neil Barnett is also a Chelsea presenter, so you're talking about somebody who's been with Chelsea for decades upon decades, and maybe not the biggest fan of Spurs or Pochettino. The question was, where does he end up next? And is it Bayern Munich? Is it Real Madrid? If they move on from Zidane, people have brought up Barcelona. He's not going to Barcelona. This is a guy who played and managed at Espanyol across town. He's not going to Barcelona. But name a big club that's in need of a manager, and Pochettino's name has come up. And Barnett was like, no, he's not going to get a big club because he hasn't won anything. I don't know if he's going to take a big club job, because I think he's the type of manager who likes a project. And that might not be at a big club, but there is one big club that I think would be a project that could be very attractive to him, and that's Milan. Because if you go there and you get Milan back to where they want to be, and Pochettino has shown, he got frustrated with not getting players brought in, but he made the most out of what he had, and he can do that. So if you go to a Milan and you can make the most out of what you have and get that team back into the Champions League, that could be the type of job that's appealing to him. And I thought it was interesting as well yesterday, the talk about, well, obviously everybody jumps out like, oh, he's going to go to Miami. I don't know about that. Not yet anyway. But could I see Mauricio Pochettino managing in Major League Soccer? Absolutely. Because, again, it's the idea of the project. And just like it attracted Tata Martino, it's a job where, because of the nature of the league, because of how competitive it is, because of the rules in place to keep teams as even as you possibly can, managers and their impact, it's pronounced. So for a guy like Pochettino who thinks about the game in the way he does, yeah, I could see him taking on a high-profile MLS job at some point. I don't know if that's now. I think, honestly,
I still think he needs a break.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. After this whole experience, he needs to just take the rest of the European season off, see what's out there in the summer, and that could be Milan. Milan is the one to me that makes the most sense. But take your time, keep your staff together, because that's the other question when it comes to Mourinho that's a valid one. His staff, because generally you have a core of guys, and you might make changes here and there at different clubs you go to, but generally you have a core of guys that are going to go with you. Well, Mourinho doesn't have that now. Pochettino's had the same group for a long time. You can't stay inactive for too long because those guys got to get paid. They're not making Pochettino money. They're making assistant money. They're making trainer money. They're making different types of money. They got to make money, and hopefully they got a nice exit clause from Tottenham. But I think you're taking the rest of the year off. You're not rushing into anything, and then you see what happens in the summer because you could have Real Madrid open in the summer. It's definitely possible that things go south and you end up looking at a situation where they move on from Zidane. You could have, who knows? I mean, you could have Manchester United open in the summer. It's possible.
Yeah.
And they were interested in Pochettino before. You could have Bayern still open at that point. You could have Milan open at that point. You could have a few other Italian clubs open at that point. I mean, PSG maybe. That could be attractive. Who knows? I think you wait till the summer and then you see what you want to do. But Pochettino is a manager who I love the way he thinks about the game. I highly recommend the book about one of his early seasons at Tottenham that almost functioned as like a diary of his time there because it started as somebody looking at it from the outside and it ended up being Pochettino really like essentially writing it. It was really good and really fascinating. I love the way he sees the game and thinks about it, and I love his passion for the game. I think he'll be successful, but what he wants out of a club, and this is where I differ from what Barnett said, I don't think he feels the need to have to go to a big club. I think he is going to be attracted by the project at hand. And it could be like Manchester United for right now, for example. It's a project. It's absolutely a project to get them back to where they used to be. Would Real Madrid be that? Not really. Milan would be that. I don't think Bayern Munich would be that. So I think he wants to go somewhere where he can be there for a full chapter. And that was what was talked about so much about Tottenham, was that it felt like the Champions League final was the end of a chapter.
Yeah.
And it was the best time to move on then, but that's also a very hard time to move on because you're coming off of a Champions League final appearance.
Yes. I mean, coaches, regardless of sport, I mean, there are different personalities. And I think it's safe to classify Mauricio Pochettino as a builder, someone who wants to take on a project and the foundation may be there. The house might be a little run down, might be a little outdated in the neighborhood that you're in, but he sees what the house can be in the neighborhood that it's in. And you saw what he could do at Spurs, taking them to the Champions League final. And I agree. I think that probably was the end of the chapter of that book. And you got everything to a certain point. And I think that having someone like that, he's going to look for where's the next house in that subdivision that might be a little run down, might be a little outdated, and can sit there and make it stand up against all the other homes in the neighborhood.
All right, a couple other things before we finish up with Twitter, because there's plenty of things to get to there. The Chicago Fire logo that had leaked, I think, over the weekend, and there were some grainy pictures of it, and the colors didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Well, just posted on Reddit, and not 100% sure this is accurate, but it looks like a trademark filing for that logo. Now, it's black and white. It doesn't have the colors. I think the colors, based off other reports we'd had, Chicago's primary color will be navy blue going forward with red as a secondary, flipping what it's been in the past. But it's an oval, and this is the description of the mark. The mark consists of the word Chicago Fire FC within an oval design with 6 triangles in the center. It's not as good as what they had. And I think if you're comparing the two that way, you're going to be disappointed with it. If this was the first logo they ever did, it's okay. I mean, I don't know what the triangles necessarily mean. I'm sure there is some very highbrow representation of what each of the 6 triangles mean. There's got to be something like that. It'll come out. I don't know if it was necessary.
For me, I would have done something that would have been straight up flag of Chicago. If you were going to redo a logo with the 4, whatever those things are, the 4 sunbursts or whatever you want to call them in the middle of the white middle section with the 2 blue stripes. Okay.
They're just stars.
I would have done something like that. If you're going to rebrand and, obviously the Chicago Fire and the Maltese Cross and everything like that, that to me is iconic, and it's time for a reboot. I get it. I would have done something straight up, because if you're moving back to the city of Chicago, you're moving back downtown, you're at Soldier Field, what's more Chicago than that 4-star flag? Something like that. That would have been something for me.
Yeah, I mean, the Chicago Red Stars kind of they don't own that branding, but they've kind of made it their own. Maybe you didn't want to go down that road, which I somewhat get, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the reaction is. The general reaction in like your hardcore soccer bubble has been negative towards it. I wonder what the general mainstream reaction will be to it, and we'll just have to wait and see. So stay tuned there. No other updates as of yet on moves around MLS. On the women's side, North Carolina Courage, most valuable player for the year, Denise O'Sullivan, has signed a multi-year contract with the team as they try to keep their core together. Rumors out of Turkey, Montreal is interested in Kyle Larin, formerly of Orlando City, who has started to play more. It was a slow start for him when he went to Turkey, but he started to play more. Could he come in and be that number 9 for the Impact? Reportedly, and the link is that Thierry Henry has wanted to bring him in. Take that type of stuff with a grain of salt, just because we've seen it over the years in the rumor mills around MLS. Whether it's Atlanta has Mucha Plata, whether it's everybody with the LA Galaxy, because the LA Galaxy have always been that team. Now it's, Thierry Henry likes this guy because he's a big name. Like, you're going to get those types of things that happen. So keep waiting on more, but that's one to keep an eye on. Larin, who has been linked with moves back to MLS before. Montreal is the one reportedly chasing him now. Let's get into the Twitter timeline, and I think we probably have stuff from all over the gamut at the moment. So let's finish up with that.
Free Speech Tourist. As a Spurs supporter, I've decided to embrace the darkness.
Oh, no.
Jose isn't a long-term solution. He is under contract through 2023. But maybe he can get something.
2023.
No,
Come
3 years. 3 years. Third year is when the problems are going to be.
Not even 3 years.
Jose isn't a long-term solution, but maybe he can get something out of the pouting wantaways by threatening to publicly trash them. He's not at Real Madrid because he's not tough enough for Real Madrid. That kind of stuff. Free Speech Tourist, embracing the darkness.
I just don't think that helps. I don't think that helps it. So let's go back through Jose's recent times. We will work backwards. So Manchester United, he joined in May of 2016 with an option to stay through 2020. He was gone December 18, 2018. So he got through 2 years and 2.5 years. All right. Chelsea, he returned in June of 2013. He was mutual consent leaving parted company December 17 of 15. So about the same, 2.5 years. Real Madrid, May of 2010 is when it was confirmed he would be joining them. He was gone at the end of 2013 season, so May of 2013. So 3 years. is what he got at Madrid. And he said last year was the worst of his career, and before the season he had signed a contract extension to 2016, and he was gone at the end of 2013.
So basically you're looking at like New Year's Day. So after the Boxing Day fixtures of 2021, that's when Jose Mourinho's out the door at Spurs.
Well, that would be 2 years. He's gotten 2.5 in his last 2 stops. So if he gets you through the second half of the season and then the next 2, that would be what he's done. I don't know. Now, he has said, and others have said, that he has changed. And one of the reports from The Independent is that he has spent his time away developing a new strategy and philosophy, which left Tottenham Hotspur chairman Daniel Levy blown away during negotiations. He's going to have to, first off. I mean, the idea of that is not crazy, because I think what it showed at Manchester United and even a second run at Chelsea was that the Mourinho way, and you go back and study Mourinho from his rise, and we'll take it to Madrid. Madrid was where it felt like things went sideways for him. But Porto, his rise in the spotlight, we'll leave the stuff as he was building up out. Porto, Chelsea, Inter. He was ahead of the curve in where the training was going, things being functional, not just running to run. Like, everything was built around the ball. When he first came through, he was not a negative manager. His Chelsea, I think his first Chelsea team was one of the highest scoring teams in Premier League history. He got more negative and conservative over time, and it felt like the Madrid pressure cooker broke him in some ways. But he had to change, because the criticism of him at Madrid, second time at Chelsea, and especially at Manchester United, was that his methods, his philosophy, his way of seeing the game was outdated. He had been passed. So he's got to come at it from a different perspective. If he comes in and tries to do the same bag of tricks, it's going to fantastically fail, and they might get relegated. If he comes in with time away, where he studied where the game has gone, he's a very smart man. If he studied where things have evolved to, and it's not crazy to think that he has been sitting there from the beginning of this season looking at Tottenham as a potential landing spot and coming in prepared with, all right, if I get the job, this is what I'm going to do. That's all reasonable. And he should come in and have a short-term impact. Can he take that short-term impact and make it a longer term? Not long-term, because that's not how he operates, but longer term. If he comes in with the same ideas that he left with, not going to work. If he comes in with a new philosophy and some new ideas, maybe. Maybe. It's still a maybe. Because I just don't think the fit is there for him at Spurs.
No.
But we'll have to wait and see. It'll definitely be worth watching. I can tell you that much.
Alex at Cuppers with a true Wall Pass Wednesday thought.
Okay.
Clearly, at DC United is late to the candy party, so I think y'all need to do MLS teams as Thanksgiving sides.
Yeah, what in the world? Okay, so DC United, I want to give them a lot of credit first with a cool thread that emerged yesterday. It's 20 years from MLS Cup 1999 championship team. It was their third MLS Cup in 4 years. It was the very beginning days of the league, but they set the standard early on. And they asked for people to give their favorite memories of Marco Echeverri. Marco Echeverri is one of the all-time greats in this league, and he's one that I hate that he wasn't 10 years older and wasn't in the league at a time where it was bigger and more widespread. And go watch Marco Echeverri highlights. Go watch what Echeverry did on the field. He was unbelievable. El Diablo was just an unbelievable player. But the two stories that jumped out to me that were just awesome from former players in the league. First was a teammate, Santino Quaranta, who said first training for DC, he was a young signing at 16 years old before the homegrown process. He's training with DC, his first training. He looks at Echeverry. He says, Echeverry, he was surrounded by 3 players, so I didn't pass him the ball. He looked at me and yelled, don't ever do that again. I don't care if I have 10 players on me. Give me the effing ball. I gotta love any player like that. And then Brian Dunseth said, true story. Echeverry and I were jawing at one another during a game in MLS. He was cursing at me in Spanish. I was cursing at him in English. Ref showed me a yellow card, nothing to him. I asked why. The ref shrugged his shoulders and said, you can't talk to him like that. That's correct. Echeverry is one of the legends of the South American game, one of the legends of MLS. And that awesome thread, cool stuff, DC United. So then they follow that up with a tweet last night, a thread, MLS teams as candy. Keep it peachy, fam, at Atlanta United. And it's like a peach sour thing, I guess. Dallas was Milk Duds. Chicago was Atomic Fireball. Orlando City was a Grape Blow Pop, and so on and so forth. Huh? What? Why? Are you that bored? Okay.
Maybe a Coke float would have been more appropriate.
It's not candy. How's a Coke float candy? I mean, the peach, and I get it, but Coke float's not candy, John.
It's dessert, or it's a side.
Candy. MLS teams.
What else
candy.
could you What else could you associate with this particular part of the world? I mean, Claxton fruitcake, but that's not candy.
It's not candy. So something peach. Okay, that's fine. Like I don't care about the candy they picked. I'm saying, why are you doing this?
Yeah, oh no, I agree. I'm just, like I said, I agree with you on that front, but I'm also trying to figure out what the candy actually would be. Something native and something candy-based.
No, lemon heads for Columbus. It's just because it's yellow. It's just yellow.
Well, they really were looking for something to do that day, weren't they?
LAFC, whatchamacallit. Junior Mints for Minnesota. Laffy Taffy Banana for Nashville.
They're really stretching for content.
I just don't know. So now
I
we have
believe
been
that
tasked.
would be an Ideos Mio from you.
Yeah, I already got 5 of them. So now we have been tasked. Who has given us this awful task?
That was Cuppers.
Alex, man. MLS teams as Thanksgiving side dishes or Thanksgiving dishes. We'll say Thanksgiving dishes as a whole. We'll say dishes as a whole because I don't want to put too much thought into this. Oh, jeez.
See, we got to come back to that because this is requiring thought.
No, we're not coming back to it because it's not going to take that much thought because I don't want to put it towards it. So a peach pie for Atlanta because peach. Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Let's see. Who would get the mincemeat pie because those things are just strange.
Orlando?
No, I'll give it to Philadelphia, and I really don't know why. It's just the first thing that came to mind.
I was going to say, think about strange. So where's the strangest? What's the strangest franchise? Where's the strangest?
John, you're thinking about it too much. This is not going to take thought. We're not thinking about this because we've been asked to do something, and we do what our listeners ask. But no, we're not going to make this a 20-minute description. So, green bean casseroles, Portland, because it's green.
Because it's green.
Let's see.
Pumpkin pie. With the
Pumpkin
marshmallow.
pie, we'll throw it to the Dynamo.
Yes, Houston. There you go.
Kind of orangish. So Dynamo, you're the pumpkin pie on the table.
Yes.
Throw another dish.
Ham.
Ham? Just ham?
Yeah.
I like ham. I probably like ham more than turkey. So we'll give the ham to the MLS Cup champions right now, Seattle, just because.
Macaroni and cheese, I guess, is Columbus.
Why is it Columbus?
Because it's yellow.
Could be.
Applying the same logic DC did here.
Mac and cheese. See, I really, really like mac and cheese, though.
Agreed.
Yeah, okay, we'll throw it to Columbus. That's fine. Colors are close
or Nashville.
enough. Yeah, actually, we'll throw it to Nashville. Nashville gets the mac and cheese.
Okay.
I think Nashville's good at mac and cheese. What else? What's another Thanksgiving dish?
Let's see. We've gone through.
Toronto
what
gets
are
the turkey. Teas.
Okay. What about various pies?
We've done a lot of pies. So who's the gravy?
Who's got a brown kit?
Nobody has a brown kit.
Sacramento.
They're not in the league yet. I will go with something that's very underrated, and I've made it before, and it actually came out pretty good. The giblet gravy.
Okay.
I will throw that to who is underrated and interesting, and I like them. The San Jose Earthquakes.
There you go.
They are the giblet gravy. Okay.
Okay.
Any more?
Apple pie, lemon meringue pie.
Apple pie, very basic, very good. Hard to screw up. Standard bearer kind of thing. Now we already threw the ham to Seattle, so we can't do that. Basic and solid. You know what? I'm going to go with the apple pie to New England. The Revolution, the red, white, and blue. It's apple pie. There we go.
I'm trying to think of. So you mentioned green beans and green bean casserole. Can I go into Portland? I'm trying to think of my plate. Well, then you mentioned your giblet gravy. You got stuffing and dressing.
So the stuffing would be up north. So we've already thrown something to the Revs. I don't know if Chicago gets into stuffing or not. For some reason, I'm thinking it's Northeastern. So we'll give the stuffing to the Red Bulls.
Yeah.
And we'll give the dressing to Dallas because they'd probably come up with something really interesting.
Cranberry sauce.
Cranberry sauce. Like, are we
I would have
talking
said Portland because of the rose kit, but you already gave.
Are we talking out of a can, or are we talking like genuine?
You can split hairs if you
sauce?
want.
If we're talking out of a can, generic, we will put the generic canned cranberry sauce, which is not as bad as you think it would be.
Oh, that's awesome!
But it's still out of a can. You didn't like it? You're upset by this?
No, I love cranberry
love
out of the can.
So you love it out of the can. You like that more than like the real homemade cranberry
because
sauce.
the homemade has the possibility of going sideways if done incorrectly. It's a fail-safe for me.
For you, not for most people.
Yeah. No.
Okay. So then we will say, according to John's logic, and I don't know if I agree with that, but I will follow it for now. Miami gets the homemade cranberry sauce that could be amazing, but it could get sideways. The canned one, that will be just, it is what it is. You know what to
DC
expect.
United?
No, I don't know what to expect from them yet. It is Colorado.
Okay.
All right, we're good. We hit
legends.
most of the teams. We're good. We did your task, Alex. Cuppers.
All right. Yes. Since we're in added time, we're going to blow through some things.
Cuppers.
Tafka's incredibly happy after being out of shape for a number of years. He's remarkably returned to being able to run 25 to 30 minutes straight without stopping. Completed his fourth run in 2 weeks last night. And all runs have been at least 25 minutes long.
Good stuff.
Nathan Pugh is trying to entice us to come up 316 to the greater Gwinnett area. The northeastern burbs need some love.
We are working on it. That is on the list, and thanks to Scott Flood for starting to navigate this tour and getting us out into places. It was a lot of fun seeing people last night and coming out on a Tuesday night. It will be a lot of fun on December 4th at Reformation Brewery in Canton, and Gwinnett is absolutely on the list. It's just trying to create the right partnership and the right time and place to get it done. So we're coming your way, Nathan.
The Colonel's looking for Gareth Bale to come to MLS.
Gareth Bale's craziness right now. If you didn't see the clip with Madrid from a couple months ago where they hand him the pennant and he looks at it like,
Baleface.
Why do I want to hold this? I mean, it was hashtag Baleface. Then you see him yesterday holding up a flag that says Wales, Golf, Madrid in that order. That didn't go over so well in Madrid. So I'm not touching Gareth Bale right now. Not on the salary crazy contract that Real Madrid has him on, and not because I don't know what's going on in his head at the moment.
Let's see. Drew Gano says if all it took was $200K in TAM to keep Vasquez, pretty disappointed in Atlanta United for letting him go. Going to cost much more to replace him.
That's not exactly how it worked, because you had to expose people in the draft, and you would have exposed somebody else and lost them, so you have to think about it that way. Could you have made a deal to go send him to Cincinnati on your own? Yeah, potentially, but then if you'd done that before the draft, then you're still back to the protection issue and stuff like that. So I don't know if it's going to cost more to replace him. And the other thing, too, is he might have wanted to go. And this is where my head's been with this from the beginning of this process once the season ended. He needs to play. And he's never going to be the first choice option here if Joseph Martinez is healthy. And you have to operate with the understanding that he's going to be healthy. Vasquez needs to play. He might have requested to go. And the flip side is I think you need something different in that role. Like Vasquez, look, it's very easy to forget. He barely factored into anything in 2018. The first half of 2019, his performances with Atlanta United, too, were not good. And it kind of felt like he was on his last legs with the club going into the Open Cup. And then he had a huge run. And then he delivered in performances in MLS as well, to the point that you moved Romario Williams on, and it was Vasquez as the number 2 option. But then go back and look at your 18s very late in the season. Vasquez wasn't factoring into those. So you need something else out of that role. I think it's best for everybody. I really do. I think it's a win-win for everybody involved. The only thing would be, could you have traded Vasquez to Cincinnati on your own? Was there a way you could have swung that and still not lost anybody else in the draft? Maybe, but that would have been trickier to do.
Tafka is saying that Chicago should keep the Florian Cross, change the inside content. It's enough to maintain the old but refresh the brand.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to put it. I just don't know if they needed a refresh on the logo. I'm glad they didn't completely rebrand. That would have been a waste, but I don't know if they really needed to refresh the logo. I mean, maybe you can find a way to do something where you still involve the old logo or elements of it in something. I don't know. I'm underwhelmed by the new logo. I don't actively dislike it, which I guess is good because you can go from there, and if you tell the story well and the team is good, then all of it can work. But I just don't know if it was really needed. We'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. It does feel like a new day for the Chicago Fire, being at Soldier Field, and likely with you want to see where they go at the manager. You want to see where they go with their roster. I would think they're going to go kind of big. So it's the time to do it. I just don't know if this was the way to actually do it.
Then a couple of other things. Marshall Voigt, yes, last night's roundtable will be released. They'll be released over the weekend, probably in pieces.
Yeah, I think we'll do 2
Daniel
parts because
Price,
it was a lot of talking.
Yeah. Daniel Price says he's late to the party. What was today's show about? He said his wife had an appointment this morning. Everything's good. 9 weeks to go before his holding midfielder comes and visits us.
Don't pencil in the child as a holding midfielder. You never know what the personality is going to be. You could get a striker. You could get a goalkeeper. You never know. You don't want to force them into a role that is not befitting of them. So,
true.
Wait and see.
And then last thing on the board comes from the Colonel. Although Jason didn't seem to appreciate it, the DCU Candygram was first-class trolling. Check NYCFC, Red Bulls, Union, and Miami especially. A side dish gate. You guys are doing it wrong. You don't think of a side and try to link it to a team. Rather think of a team, and then what side describes them. Hashtag Wild Pass Wednesday.
I just didn't like the exercise, so I wanted to get through it as fast as possible. I blame Cuppers. And yes, there was some trolling involved. There was some trolling involved on the DC one. I would not go first class trolling. It might have been third class or fourth or maybe 10th.
We're caught up.
Matt Wagner threw a question too. If you're the Atlanta front office and FDB, then who do you go after? What type of player to be Joseph's backup in 2020? Does this player exist today in the twos, or do you go outside and bring in someone new? I think you have to go outside because you don't want to stunt Jackson Conway's development in making him a reserve at the first team level. He needs to play. So I think you need a veteran. You know, we mentioned a player like Will Bruin, a player like Patrick Mullins, something like that, a veteran who is comfortable not starting every game, a player who is comfortable in, you know, still giving you everything you need on the training pitch day in and day out to make this team better, and a player who, you know, whether it's international duty, whether it's a short-term injury, even if it's a long-term injury, whatever you have to do, a player who then is comfortable to step in and start and has the experience to back it up. You need those kind of players to win championships. And at the forward role, it's something Atlanta United really hasn't had. You had Romario Williams, you had Brandon Vasquez. You know, first year, you could have had Kenwyn Jones in this role, and then injuries kind of took that away. But that was what it had evolved into pretty quickly in 2017. It's that kind of player that you need. And with the way the rosters are constructed, I think you need a domestic player in that role. Like, you don't want to go and use an international slot on this reserve role. That's why Bruin and Mullins are two that jump out as strong possibilities for this kind of role. And they're different. They're guys who can be difficult on set pieces, can put in cross, or can get on the end of crosses, and can give you an option when the game gets bogged down and you have to get more direct to bring others into the play and link others. That's why I'd go more in that direction than other veteran forwards like a Quincy Amarikwa, who wants to run in behind and going to give you a lot of what Joseph gives you. In a perfect world, you can find somebody who gives you a different type of forward and can give you a different look when it's needed, and even potentially at times play with Joseph in that role. So Bruin and Mullins are the two that I've kind of come back to a lot. I'm trying to think of others around the league who would be in reserve forward kind of roles. Let's think here of teams that could have somebody available in this type of situation. New York City didn't really have anybody. Red Bulls had younger guys who were backing up Bradley Wright Phillips, but then ended up getting that time, so it's not really where you want to go. Out west, Galaxy didn't really have that. LAFC didn't really have that. Seattle had Bruin. I mean, the other option, and I'd have to dig even deeper, and I have to think about this before the next show, would be a guy who maybe dropped down to USL and could be a contributor stepping back up. I think we're starting to see teams identify contributors out of USL coming to MLS. Looks like Michael Chang will get signed by RSL after good years with the Real Monarchs. Before that, good years with the Charleston Battery. Is he going to go in and start at RSL? Probably not. Is he still going to play some with the Real Monarchs? Probably. But do they see him now as somebody who can contribute in MLS? Yes. Is there a player like that could be this for Atlanta United? Have to think about it. It's just, I think you need a specific type of player, and I think you need a specific type of personality to accept this kind of role. And I just keep going back to a veteran closer to a target number 9. I think that's one of the missing links for this team. Not an easy person to find, though.
We're still officially caught up.
All right. So, keep an eye on everything social media oriented today, because you're going to get more announcements of options being picked up, not being picked up, movement happening. It's tomorrow at 1 o'clock is when things need to be filed with the office. And I know when it comes to Atlanta United, like, there's a lot of eyeballs on Gressel, on LGP. Doesn't mean a deal has to get done by tomorrow. It just means the option has to get picked up. And you're not going to let those guys walk for nothing anyway. So the option gets picked up. You're still going to negotiate a long-term deal. It's not one or the other. And just wanted to try to make that clear. Inter Miami says their manager announcement is coming. Austin FC is now saying their sporting director management is coming. So keep an eye on those. Tony Beltran, longtime outside back for Real Salt Lake, should be joining their front office as an assistant general manager. Their owner, Deloy Hansen, talked about that on ESPN 700 in Salt Lake City yesterday. They're expected to have their manager in place by December 6th. Don't know why that date has been set. That's kind of interesting. But they have questions to answer when it comes to the manager. Chicago now has questions. Miami has answered the questions, at least internally, and the shadow manager was involved in the expansion draft, and we'll see who said shadow manager is.
I love
maybe
that
after
term.
The Copa Libertadores finals over, just saying maybe. It's the only one that I keep coming back to that makes sense, and man, that would be a big get for Inter Miami if it's Marcelo Gallardo. We will see. It's going to be an interesting day around MLS circles, I think, as news like what happened in Philadelphia continues to come out. So we'll keep throwing it at you on our Twitter accounts, OSG Nelson, Longshoe, Soccer Down Here, and we'll be back to talk about it tomorrow morning. Thanks, everybody, and watch us on Stoppage Time on Facebook.com/929thegame at 2 o'clock. Much plot, y'all.
Much plot.